The Blueprint of Change. The Constitutional Evaluation of India 1858 to 1919. Welcome to the Blueprint of Change, the podcast where we dive into the pivotal movement that have shaped in the nations and the governance. I'm your host Cletaversal, and today we are embarking on a journey through Indian constitutional evaluation from mid-19th century up to the Transformative Government of India Act of 1919. Setting the stage, a tabula rasa no more. As we begin, it's essential to understand that no society starts as a blank slate or a tabula rasa. Every society has its own system of organization and regulation that evolve over time. Constitution as we recognize them today are relatively modern constructs. The United States Constitution of 1789 is often cited as a seminal document that set a precedent for constitutional governance. However, constitution usually emerges from significant shift or breaks from previous arrangement, signaling a fresh start and a deeper appreciation of governance principle. To grasp the essence of India's present constitution, we must briefly explore the constitutional framework that preceded it. Colonial foundation from East India Company to British Crown. India's legal and constitutional history through colonial period is intricate, beginning with East India Company arrival in early 17th century. For nearly 2 centuries, the company governed India, primarily focusing on trade and expanding its influence. The pivotal movement came in 1857 with Indian rebellion and extensive uprising against company rule. The aftermath, the British government dissolved the East India Company in 1858, assuming direct control over India's administration. The transition marked the beginning of British Raj, with the governance structure centrally through the Governor General and his council, and provincially through governors and their council. Now let us go to the segment 3rd, that is the seat of self-government, the rise of India nationalization. As the British tightened their grip, so did Indian aspiration for self-governance grow. The establishment of Indian National Congress in 1885 was a significant milestone, primarily led by educated elites, especially lawyers. The Congress became a platform for Indians to articulate their demands for constitutional reform. Despite this effort, early proposals from Congress did not gain substantial traction. The British government remained largely indifferent to demand of meaningful participation of Indians in governance or the assurance of fundamental rights. Segment 4. The Indian Councils Act of 1892. The step forward but inadequate. In response to precedent demand, the British introduced India Council Act of 1892. This act made provisions for the inclusion of Indians in the Legislative Council. However, it stopped short of allowing Indians to join the Executive Council, leaving the administration firmly in the British hands. The limited nature of this inclusion did little to satiate the growing demand for greater self-governance. Indians continue to push for more substantial reforms that will grant them real power and representation. Segment 5. The 1909 Reform, Minto-Morley Act and its implication. Now, the turning point came in 1909 with the introduction of the Indian Council Act, popularly known as Minto-Morley Reform, named after Governor General Lord Minto and the Secretary of the State for India, John Morley. The act was significant for several reasons. Now, the first reason was increased legislative representation. Now, the number of legislative members in the central legislature was raised from 15 to a maximum of 60. Similarly, provincial legislature saw an increase. Madras, Bombay, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh and East Bengal to 50 members each day, and Punjab and Burma to 30. Second one, indirect election. For the first time, an elaborate scheme for indirect election of members were introduced, allowing representation of diverse societal interests such as universities, trade unions, municipalities, and various communities. Third one, extended legislative power. The powers of legislature were expanded, particularly concerning budget discussion. Members could propose alteration to the budget to resolution, although the government was not obliged to act on them. Fourth one, limitation on executive power. Despite the changes, no elected members still held a majority and executive council power remained unaltered. Key areas like military affairs, foreign relations and interaction with Indian princely state continued to be managed by executive. The Minto-Morley Act also allowed Indians to be the part of the governance council in regions like Bombay and Madras, albeit limitedly. Now, let us talk about evaluating Minto-Morley reform progress and shortcomings. While the Minto-Morley Act marked the non-notable shift towards including India in the legislative process, it fell short in several critical areas. Limited representation. First one, limited representation. Only a selected group, particularly lawyers and dominant communities, managed to secure a position in the legislature, leaving many voices unheard. Second one is executive dominance. The British executive retained overriding control over legislation and finances, limiting legislative effectiveness. Third one, lack of autonomy. Neither provincial nor central governments were granted true autonomy. The Provisional Council remains subordinate to the Secretary of State of India. Fourth one, absence of responsible government. Perhaps the most glaring omission was provision for responsible government, where the executive is accountable to legislature. There was primarily demand of Indian nationalists, and its absence fueled further discontent. These differences became increasingly evident as Indian independence movement gained momentum, demanding more substantial and meaningful reforms. The Road to the Government of India Act 1919. The Minto-Morley reform, while step forward, failed to quell the growing unrest and aspiration for self-rule. The Indian populace, galvanized by promise of responsible government, continued to press for more comprehensive reform. Within a decade of 1909 Act, the British government recognized the need for deeper changes to address Indians' political problems. This led to consideration and eventual enactment of Government of India Act 1919, which aimed to introduce further self-governance and lay the groundwork for eventual independence. Now, let us come to the conclusion. The legacy of early reform. The constitutional reform of late 19th and early 20th centuries laid foundational framework for Indians' eventual journey to independence, while acts like Minto-Morley reforms expanded legislative participation. Their limitation underscored the need for more profound changes. Understanding this early constitutional arrangement is crucial, not just for historical insight but also for appreciating complexities that shape India's current legal and governance system. In our next episode, we'll dive deeper into Government of India Act 1919 and its role for steering India towards self-governance. Until then, thank you for joining us on the Blueprint of Change and listening in the Cletaversal. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate and leave a review. Your support helps us to bring more insightful content to listeners like you. Stay curious and keep exploring. Thank you.